Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our fourth season, we are looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 film, Thor. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast, recording this week without Matthew, who unfortunately is out with COVID, but fingers crossed he will be back on his feet and ready to record with us next week. Today, I'm talking about Minute 91, which begins with a casual call from the son of Cole and ends with a caravan to Bifrost Junction. Joining us on the show today, we have James Anderson and Colin M. Parker, hosts of the Timeline Scavengers podcast. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me here today.
Hey, thanks.
Hey, thanks for having us.
So, Timeline Scavengers, let's talk real quick about your podcast. What are the origins of this? It's a MCU podcast or Marvel podcast. Tell me about it and what's the driving force behind it?
Well, I wanted to say first and foremost that I appreciated that a lot of how like your intro has like, to me, certain elements of like what we also do with our intro, but it's cool because you're doing it like chronologically, like literally, and then we're doing it in historical order.
Right.
So James likes to intake content in a way that I think most humans would never imagine. And I think that is cool because James is very inventive. James uses that way to look at things through a different lens, and I think it's very cool. And James had found a spreadsheet, which is also very James, that had the MCU movies only at the time.
It was a Word doc. It was a Word doc.
Oh, it was a Word doc. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That was the one flaw with it.
That broke down the MCU movies in chronological order, but like as far as not release time, but the date within the movie, and with timestamps and everything. And so James was partaking in this, and it immediately hooked me. And I didn't know it at the time, but apparently James was leaving this sort of as a breadcrumb clue to be like, hey, you should follow this down a path with me. I feel like the hook was there. Am I misinterpreting this? Because very soon after I was like, hey, what if that but podcast?
Well, okay. So shout out to Tony Goldmark, who is the person who created that Word document. And yeah, it blew my mind to look at. Actually, we're before we started recording, we were talking about Lost. There was something called Chronologically Lost that someone put together. They like stitched together these movie files to put Lost in the order in which it takes place, was released. And so I watched that and really enjoyed it. So when I saw this, I was like, oh wow, I like the Marvel movies even maybe more than Lost. And so I watched that over last June. And then in like January, February of 2021, I found a list of chronological order of the movies plus the TV shows at the time. So I was like, what if I did the thing again, but I started inserting where the TV show scenes would go within that. So I started doing that. And Colin is very generous when he says that it was an intentional breadcrumb thing. Here's what was really happening. I was hyperfixating on doing this. I was devoting all my time to it, all my waking hours, and some of the hours I shouldn't have been awake, instead of like editing podcasts or doing like family time or whatever. So then I was telling Colin about it, and then I was like, wait a minute, if this is a podcast, then this time suck that's nothing turns into podcast research. And then that's a justification. And so Colin was just a pawn to justify my time use. Thanks, Colin.
You're welcome.
Look at that. It went from breadcrumbs to you're just a pawn in his schemes. Well, it's great. I love the whole concept. Well, I know we'll talk about it a little more. And one of these days, I would love to hop on there and chat a little bit about it.
You're on the schedule, yeah.
You were on the schedule for recording in 2021, and then we discovered 2 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which have taken us half a year to get through. So you're there.
I wish that was a joke.
It's not. Yeah. I just want to say real quick, Colin's passion for the Marvel Cinematic Universe and everything Marvel astounds me, and very happy to have him on the with me on the show, because
it's awesome.
Just before it sounded like I just used him, and I didn't.
It's really his passion. That's great. A lot of it. Well, that's awesome. Well, we're here to talk about Thor in this particular episode, and we're going to be talking specifically about minute 91. So let's start digging in. The minute starts with Agent Coulson. This is kind of, I don't know, I look at it like this is the Agent Coulson we know and love. The way that he's talking here. Donald, I don't think you've been completely honest with me. Like, that just feels like such an Agent Coulson line, doesn't it?
Start with the lie, and then expose the lie.
It's just great. And I love that he calls him Donald still. Like that, the continued callbacks with the Donald Blake character in this, I really think are a lot of fun. And then what I love about this is Thor, he comes back with a very kind of direct moment here. Know this, son of Cole, you and I, we fight for the same cause, the protection of this world. From this day forward, you can count on me as your ally if you return the items you have taken from Jane.
Stolen.
Borrowed.
Yeah, right. There you go. It's a great little moment here, and what I think is interesting, and I want to get your impressions on this moment here. The whole conversation to me feels like this kind of shift in Thor's presence and the way he's presenting himself, like from what we had before to now. What did you two get out of the way that Thor comes into this moment after what we've seen so far?
It's weird because you're right. It's like in making this declaration, which on a comic book page would be like a 3/4 page spread because it's like a full, like, you know, they put it in nice writing. It's like that said, now he can be a normal Earth person almost. Like he turns into sort of just like cool boyfriend guy who can fly and has the Bifrost and all this stuff. Because the way that he says the thing to Coulson feels like Shakespearean in a way of like he's reciting it almost. Like I would be surprised to learn that this is like the official way that you declare an allyship on Asgard.
Yeah.
Because of the way he says it. The way he says it is sort of by rote almost, which isn't how he says any of his other lines. So it's like he's saying, know this, insert name. From now on, you and me shall, you know, like it's like a fill in the blank sort of deal to make it official.
I think it's also very cool because, you know, now looking at this sort of scene with the context of where he starts the movie, which is, you know, brash and arrogant and just like very flashy, you know, to have basically fallen so far and to know that he's only in this moment because he climbed back up, but in the way that he was supposed to. He's coming into it with the type of like bravado and confidence and also like authority that he was supposed to have to begin with, that his father was trying to impart on him, and it just didn't stick until this moment. And not that Asgard wasn't worth fighting for, but I also think that part of the thing is that Asgard is his realm and everything is so also powerful and strong and magical. And then to go to Earth where it's just like fleshy meat bags of very, very mortal people and go, oh, okay, so there's some stakes in some of these worlds that we go to that maybe I should be paying more attention to. So he does do that. And then again, he does get to be kind of like cool boyfriend to be like, hey, what's up? You know, what's up, Natalie Portman? You trying to see that bridge? And she's like, oh.
Well, don't you feel like, I don't want to jump ahead, but so Coulson's like, of course we'll give you back your stuff because you got to keep doing your research. And it's almost like he's like, you can keep doing your research. And Thor's like, yeah. Anyways, hey, want to come see my room? Like, he's like, he turns into like this little, like, yeah. Are you done here? Because we can go, you want us to go see my rainbow slide? Like,
see, that's interesting because to me, it's more bragging, right? To be like,
oh no,
hey,
sure.
Want to see how cool I really am? Like, you've just seen the tip of the iceberg. I've got a full Death Star Lego set. So boom. Check this out.
Okay, but isn't there something here that speaks to like this I mean, it's a very rom-com relationship. We've kind of talked about that a lot this season about how there's so many romantic elements here, and a lot of it is that romantic comedy type of stuff. But here we've got like they've had all these like nice conversations about like the bridge, the Einstein-Rosen bridge. We call it a rainbow bridge, like that sort of stuff. And then when they're on the roof of Smith Motors, they're kind of having this bonding. And he really, like, this is what I love about Thor, is he connects in such a direct and honest way. And you see it here when he's talking to Coulson about how direct and focused he is on him, and the way you're right, James, about how he says that it does feel very much like this is the official declaration that we are now making with Midgard. I am putting my stamp of approval on it. Like, it feels very much that way.
Yes.
But I do also feel like the way that he talks to Jane about the Rainbow Bridge, like, let's go see my bridge. It seems to, like, there's a little bit of that where he knows how passionate she is with science and excited about this thing. And it's just like, I now have my powers back. I can finally show you this thing that you have been so excited about all this time.
That's fair.
But I also like the idea that, hey, come check out this cool little slide I have.
But I think the cool thing about that too is that, like, it's interesting how watching Thor 1, which is a weird thing to say, I guess, in this context, but
at the time they just called it Thor, but
yeah. But like watching the original Thor movie, most of the rom-com stuff, to me, I was always like, this does not really work for me. It's like not, but like everything near the end of the movie, like right when, like, I guess it's because he's also feeling so low, so he doesn't have that confidence in any of it really. But like when he like shows up and does all the like the last 2 or 3 scenes that they have together, I was like, okay, all right, I'm starting to buy this. Like this seems to be like an actual like connection that people like would actually have, that isn't just like, okay, that's written. And I really like that. But I also really loved the relationship that like Coulson has to all of that as well. Just because, kind of like you said, like, of course, if you want to continue your research, which I also think is very much like, because now we see that there's some major like stuff that this has real life application, and we want you to do that research so that we can also have it. So, it's a little bit of that, like, we're a government agency, but it's also just quintessential Coulson, especially as he's like, wait, I need to debrief you, as he's like, right. Can't hear him anymore. Just like still screaming up at him like, wait, no.
Well, I was just wondering, is the debriefing, is that also cataloging him? Like, how far are they going with this debriefing? We know what S.H.I.E.L.D. does with these people.
Yeah, I'm sure it's something to do with like their index, or
exactly.
Also potentially part of the Avengers initiative.
Yeah, certainly. Absolutely.
No, I don't think this movie's going to have anything to do with that.
Yeah, probably not.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Never mind. No, I guess I'm wrong.
It is interesting the way that Coulson does approach this, and the whole idea of returning the, taken, stolen, borrowed equipment back to Jane, and that he's like, you're going to need it to continue your research. There's a part of that feels very much like, the end of like the Goonies, or the sort of thing, like, we can have our house back, guys. It's like that sort of line, like you're going to need it to continue your research. But I do kind of like the way that it carries. And I mean, to your point that you were saying, Colin, it's interesting. They cut it, but in the script, Agent Coulson continues, and he says, which after today's events, S.H.I.E.L.D. would like to fully sponsor, if that's all right with you.
Oh, see, that's, I'm surprised that got cut, because I feel like that's very, I mean, I guess it's in the context there of like, oh, you're going to need it to finish your research.
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of like the hidden undertext. But I don't know. Like, my thing is that I really like Coulson a lot. And I do think that even though some of it is that stuff that I was saying earlier, where it's like, I mean, it's a government agency. Like, we know what their deal is. I think that he is always so like sincere with how he addresses people.
Yeah.
And so, the way he's like I borrowed, because like I don't think that he would like to view it as stealing.
Yeah.
He's like, I know it's a gray area, but we need to all come into an agreement that we're on the same side, as Thor just said.
Yeah.
And also being like, we want to see what's best for the world, and what you're doing can contribute to that.
I think taken, stolen, borrowed is really interesting, because I think it's all 3 of their perspectives on what happened. Because taken means I took it indefinitely. Stolen refers to like a law and property ownership. And then borrowed refers to, like you said, a gray area in between, where it's like, I recognize it's yours, I'm going to take it without asking, but on the idea that I'm going to give it back. Like,
yeah,
it's reaching a gray area, but it's also sort of almost like a thesis statement of their relationship with ownership and the government's role in taking, borrowing, stealing stuff.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes, it was appropriately governmental wording that he used there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I also like to think that they showed this movie to a bunch of scientists, and they were like, "It's too unbelievable that he would just offer them full sponsorship." So you got to cut that line. That's just that's where they lost the scientists.
if current modern day scientific, we'll just say research and moments, maybe. I think it's very clear that like very frequently we're like, "Hi, we should fund these things," and people are like, I don't know about that. More money to the military, thank you.
Right. Yeah. I think that was probably one of the reasons that they're probably also. It's like, well, S.H.I.E.L.D. is supposed to be covert. It feels weird if they're actually sponsoring something like out there.
Here's
like
your S.H.I.E.L.D. American Express card.
You can expense up to 70% of things, but we do expect you to use like these discounts at only these hotels. But I also was going to point out, though, that like something that's interesting, and like I know this is kind of looking ahead, but like Thor, I think it's very easy for most people to, whether it's in comics or in the movies, for people to assume that Thor is stupid or dumb, maybe, but he is much smarter than I think people believe he is. Like for him, he says it in some movie. I'm not sure which movie, maybe in multiple. Actually, he definitely says it in Thor, this movie. I mean, where he talks about like what you call science, like is magic to us, so
the other way around. Yeah.
Right.
We should start keeping a tally of the number of times in Marvel works the concept of science far enough advanced beyond human understanding will be perceived as magic. Right. Because I know Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. says it. I'm pretty sure Runaways does it. Like Thor does it. Iron Man surely. Like all the Kevin really likes that thing, I guess, or something.
Yeah. Because like the big thing for me here is that like he does just call it like he does the line of like, oh, we call it Rainbow Bridge or whatever. But like in Thor Ragnarok, he then like says at the same time with Bruce Banner like the type of star and the bridge name and everything. Like he goes through the whole thing, like, but like not like, oh, I'm being a parrot. I've heard this word before, like, so I just assume that I know. Like, no, he's like actually like giving you the real thing. It's just like kind of from a different perspective, I guess, where again, he sees it as it's truly like a scientific thing of like a star is or whatever, but it's magic because of these three things. And then Bruce sees it this way. And same with like, I said Natalie Portman. I'm sorry. Jane Foster would see it. It's hard not to look at her and just immediately go, Natalie Portman.
Yeah, right. Well, I think all of that, I mean, it's a very interesting kind of element that, speaking to how Thor kind of sees the world and everything. And I think that says a lot about it. And also, I think, I mean, we talked about this way early on, probably when we're talking about like back in Norway in 965 AD. But the whole idea of how would we describe something that is commonplace to us that might seem like magic to them? Like, how do I get my signal through a cell phone? It's like, oh, just like airwaves. And I mean, yeah, Rainbow Bridge. It's like you hear these things like airwave. That sounds so silly. Like, what does that actually mean? But you think about it, it's like, yeah, well, it probably doesn't sound any different than Rainbow Bridge. So
it's true.
Yeah.
But then, a big conversation that we've had a lot over the course of the show is there's magic that is just really advanced science. But then there's also magic because Loki is just doing magic. Sure. So it's like, they've kind of got all of it. So.
And Mjolnir is like certainly there's no science I think could explain any of how that works.
Yeah. We decided it's a very, very advanced form of Siri or something.
Yeah. It's like a
two-factor
fingerprint technology. Yeah, like a biometric sort of deal. But it's like a morality metric.
Yeah, some crazy thing.
If Thor forgets to shave for a bit, he has to like put in a passcode instead because it can't recognize his face. He's like, damn it.
That's right.
He eats a grape at the grocery store, and it's like, nope, you got to go do a good deed because
he's like, I set this 3,000 years ago. What was it? Oh man, is there? I forgot my passcode on this thing, or what's going on?
Oh, well, all right. So back to this minute, we have a few background agents with Agent Coulson. Unfortunately, they're so far back, I can't tell who they are. But it does beg the question here. We had two agents, Agent Garrett and Agent Kale, who were up on the roof across the street from Smith Motors. Are these two agents okay? Were they incinerated? This is kind of one of these things where that you have these moments in these films where agents kind of go missing. I know it happened back in Iron Man. You know, it happens periodically where you just have agents who disappear off the screen and then you just never see them again. Any sense from either of you? Do you think that these two agents made it down okay, or do you think that they were burned to a crisp up on top of one of the buildings?
Anytime an agent goes missing or you're worried about the safety of your favorite S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, they were in LMD and they can be re-downloaded and they'll be fine. They're stored up in the cloud.
Okay.
So you're good.
I think about this a lot with actually like the bit villains, like the goons, if you want to, like the hired hands, like I think about it a lot specifically with like Captain America 2, Winter Soldier, right? There's this whole thing that they'll do about like, we're not going to kill, these people, but then they will superpower kick someone and have their spine go right into the railing of a boat as they then go over it. That man's body is now jelly and he's just in the ocean. He's definitely dead, right? It's the same thing here. Like, I think that there are times where we just lose track of people and we assume that they're just on the ground like, oh, it hurts. Someone call a medic.
Ouchie, ouchie,
ouch,
ouchie.
Ouch. Ooh, ooh. Yeah. Or, or just someone going, hello? Is anyone out there? I'm still up here. Hello? Like, just like 3 hours later, like, I can't get down. Yeah. Just like, they have to call the fire department to get down like a stray kitten.
Oh!
Yeah. Wait, no. Thor, don't go. Damn it. How do I get down from here?
I've broken my other leg.
Yeah.
Thor and Jane, as they fly off, they just kind of wave down. Oh, hi there.
I'd like to imagine that, like, while Coulson is in charge of going to talk to Thor, surely not 30 agents are just standing there staring at the whole interaction. Surely someone's like a medic going around and checking people and like getting people down or, giving them aid. So I'm going to assume that they're okay, because I feel like until you show me someone for sure dead, I'm just going to go, they're fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Habeas corpus.
Exactly. And I think that's generally the way that these things work. You're like, you kind of, I don't know. Sometimes you say, what, everyone in that room died. There's no way anyone made it out. But in this case, it's like, they probably could have made it. I'm not going to worry too much about it.
Until I see the fan fiction where Agent Cole becomes our favorite character.
That's right.
And then I'll believe anything.
Exactly.
But won't we have egg on our face when like a super villain origin story is Agent Garrett coming back and being like, Agent Cole was the finest that this organization had, and you just let him die up on that rooftop, and now I'm here to take you out. Like that's going to be
right. Mystical powers that he got from the blast from the destroyer that should have killed him, but somehow it imbued him with magical powers. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe he's Inhuman or an X-Men, like he's a mutant and that kick-started his ability. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
So much.
Things happen.
You never know.
So Thor grabs Jane. He's going to take her to see his bridge. And, she's a little nonchalant, but kind of excited. But I got to say, when he grabs her and pulls her close, she's just got the greatest reaction. There's some excitement, some giddiness, maybe some arousal. I don't know. Any impressions from either of you on this moment?
I understand it 100%. That's kind of also part of the chemistry thing that I was talking about earlier. It'll come up again in, I think it's the next minute, maybe 2 minutes from now. I forgot now in my head which order things happen in. But like for sure, like there are a couple of different reactions from her where I'm like, I mean, if Thor / Chris Hemsworth was just like, yoink, like, and pulled me in close, I'd be like, what's happening? Why is yes, Mr. Hemsworth, very nice weather in how's Asgard? Just like
Right.
Yeah.
Where are we? I think it's sort of a tension whiplash a little bit, because it's like she's looking at Eric kind of like, yay, we get to go back to what? Oh, whoa, I'm flying. Oh right, the tall man next to me, the tall buff god is gonna take me Rainbow Bridge. I'm not. Yeah, we're going up in the air.
He'll literally sweep her off her feet.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And
exactly.
hadn't seen him fly until like just recently. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't like, oh, okay, you're Thor, and there's like a lot of like disbelief and stuff. And then now suddenly, oh, he does have this hammer. Oh, he does. That's crazy, you know.
Up until now, mostly he's been hit by cars. Like she knows him mostly as getting hit by cars.
She's hit him.
She's hit him by the cars, right?
Allegedly, neither here nor there. But yeah.
It is. I mean, it is a great reaction that she has, and also, I mean, we're going to be talking a lot about Dutch angles this week. I have a feeling because it is a very heavy week of Dutch angles, and when you pull Natalie Portman close, or when Chris pulls Natalie close, that height difference of like a full head, it really helps when you tilt the camera to a Dutch angle so that their heads line up nicely in the shot. And so it's a great little moment that they have here. And then, of course, we get them flying up and away. And it's interesting because I don't know either of your backgrounds as far as like Thor and the comics and everything, but it's like my understanding is he generally throws the hammer and the hammer kind of pulls him along with where he's going. Yeah. The way that he seems to do it here, he does like one little underhand swing and up and away they go. And I'm like, I guess that can kind of work. I don't know. Does it speak to kind of the intentionality of the throw?
It's in the beginning, it's a little uneven, or I don't know how else to say it. Like it's very inconsistent. That's the word I'm looking for. Because definitely most comics are just like him, and usually he has to swing it for a bit,
right?
And a lot of the times he continues to swing it. It's not usually then letting go.
It's centrifugal,
right?
Yeah, right.
But it's also interesting that he could also, I don't know. It's a very weird. I feel like there's so much to talk about with like the comics representation of that sort of thing, because he also sometimes has had weapons that aren't Mjolnir and then can still fly.
Right.
So it's kind of also maybe inconsistent, or maybe it's just specific to like how powerful the weapon is, how powerful he is in that time.
That they go straight up is trouble, is bothering me, because nice move, cool like boss move, sort of a nice flex, but like I don't know that he can he turn in midair?
Well, we've debated that a little bit over the course of this show, because there are times where he does seem to fly in a specific direction, like when he's on Jotunheim, he flies straight up, but then somehow he also gets himself to turn. So we were debating, it's like, does he like pause midway up and then like re-swing it to go a different direction? Or is it like some intentionality thing and the magic imbued in Mjolnir, where once he's thrown it and it's moving, as long as he's like mentally saying
attached to it
and guiding it, saying, I want to go left, I want to go down, I want to go up, right, let's slow down and land, that might work, because there is a moment, granted it's scripted, it wasn't in the film, but when he throws Mjolnir and it's knocking just Jotun after Jotun down, it only stops when a bunch of other Jotuns that are near him actually tackle him to the ground, breaking his like mental connection or something with the hammer.
So it's like a spell. Okay.
That's our best description.
I do think it is that latter one that you offered up, because I was going to say it's in every film that Mjolnir is in. He certainly, throws it, and it's not always just in a straight line.
Yeah. He
throws it and then it continues to warp around essentially. And so it definitely is a bit of like a concentration spell if you're thinking in D&D terms. So I do think that once it's spun and thrown, I do think that it can change I think he can change directions purely because Mjolnir can.
Yeah.
But like he's essentially riding it in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's my headcanon. The longer he's on Earth, the more he is needing to follow Earth's physics. So it starts off that he's doing magic and it's a spell thing, but it gradually turns into like physics.
And he has to calculate the arc.
Yeah, exactly. He's like Colin said, he's very smart. It's just sort of an intuitive thing.
He's the Dolph Lundgren of our universe here.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what's cooler than magic?
Wrestling. Oh,
math.
There you go.
Yeah.
So. All right, so we've got Agent Coulson here. He shouts after Thor, who whisks away with Jane up into the air. Wait, I need to debrief you. And that right there, folks, is a picture wrap on Clark Gregg as Agent Coulson in Thor.
If you'd like
if
to
you've got a
more,
drink,
Clark Gregg.
take a drink. That's right.
For real. There are there's going to be about 60 episodes with him in it.
Yeah, we got a lot more Clark Gregg coming up. But for this movie, that's it. So it was great having him in this film.
He's so young in this.
I know.
Yeah, little baby Clark Gregg. That's great. It's great.
Yeah.
But with that, we actually don't follow Thor and Jane. We return to Dutch angle of the Himmelbjorg, or AKA Heimdall's Observatory, and we find Loki pulling Gungnir out of the keyhole, shutting down the Bifrost. Why is this? Is it because he has done what he said? He let Laufey and 3 of his frost giants in. I know we're going to be talking a lot about Loki and his plotting and planning. Probably we'll get into a lot of the complications and what's actually happening a little bit later. But at this point, thinking back to when you first saw this film, do you remember what your thoughts were at this point as far as what Loki and his plans were?
I think the first time I saw this movie, I remember going, I knew enough at the time, because when I first saw all these films, I was way less versed than I am now. And I was still a pretty big comic book reader and even collector back then. But I remember being you can't trust Loki further than you can throw him. And if you're Thor, you can throw him pretty far and you still can't trust him that far. So I remember being I'm sure there's more than meets the eye, but I also don't think that this is going to be what some people are going to hope for. I don't know. It's hard to describe again without revealing later things, but I remember the first time I watched this, I was kind of oh, you, and had some, stronger words for him.
I am so glad you asked this question, because I didn't take the note, and I nearly did, but then I didn't again right before we started recording. I've seen this at least twice, maybe 3 times. I still don't. I'm still just riding the wave of whatever his action is. Whenever he does something, and we're going to see a couple times in the week, he's going to be making an opposite decision. I'm what are you doing? I just chalk it up to just sort of mischief and sort of chaotic everything. I guess chaotic evil, just sort of I don't know. Now, guess who the sport is betrayal, and I'm just betraying everyone. Just betray you, betray you, betray you, betray you, and I still don't really understand what the plan is, and I'm hoping that by the time we leave recording about these minutes, that I will.
It'll become apparent. Yeah,
we shall see. Yeah,
I think he's a perfect example of a double agent, but not just in the movies, but also in the comics. His whole thing is, I'm going to essentially play both sides, and I will always go with whatever side makes me win. Because I guess really he's really a triple agent, which is that the third party is always himself. And then he plays the other 2 sides to see which side will help him get ahead. And that's why it's always hard to trust any of his plans, because you're what's the other angle?
I think that's a good way to describe it, because it does. And I think if we watch over the course of this film, there are a lot of decision points that Loki has shifted. And you're watching him minute by minute, you really get to talk about and think about wow, he's really constantly reevaluating and re-strategizing. And it makes it very complicated trying to figure out what was his plan in the beginning of the film, because it certainly wasn't this. But I think that he, as you said, he has been riding whatever wave is coming along and doing whatever works to get him farther ahead. And it's been really interesting to kind of see how it all plays out. And we're definitely going to kind of hit that peak this week. And so I'm definitely looking forward to chatting more about that.
For this movie, at least, I guess in subsequent movies, I'm more sure of what he's going for and sort of what the larger goal is. This movie, it kind of felt like he had memento disease, or Dory from Finding Dory, where it was every time he looked up, he saw who was his ally and he betrayed them. And it didn't it wasn't like he was it didn't feel to me like there was a strategy there. It was just a piecemeal. I see that I'm now here, betray.
That's interesting.
It seemed like everything that he we'll get to it in a couple minutes, but if you take how he interacts with one character, you're like, I see that he's trying to do this with this character. And then the next character comes on the screen and you're like, but what about the thing that was just happening? Like, and maybe I'm not getting, and so again, please explain it to me, but like, it feels very much like if you like sort of like when you write a story, but you read it as a group, and like I end a paragraph and then I send it to you, Andy, and then you read a paragraph and you send it to Colin, but we don't see each other's things except for the last sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is subvert whatever you think was above that.
Well, I definitely look forward to chatting more about that then later in the week, because I think there's going to be a lot of interesting conversation to have about that.
I find that all very interesting, just purely because like I had a very different viewpoint of that, I guess, mostly because like from the beginning, not when they're little kids, but like because there's not enough like conversation there, but in the first scene where you can see how upset he is as Thor is like in that coronation process, and then when the way he so easily plays Thor with there's no way to do this without going against father's wishes. Whoa, now what are you doing? Hang on now. Like that whole thing, it's like the whole time he's playing a fool because like Thor thinks, that like he, as the older brother and as the, the future king, he's got, he plays him, like a fiddle, really.
Yeah.
In that opening scene.
There's a lot to talk about with that. So let's save the rest of that for next time when we get to that, because I think we're going to have a lot of juicy stuff. But I do have a question, because at this point, we are at a point in the film where things are happening faster and faster. We've kind of crossed that line, building to the climax. I mean, how does the pace seem? I mean, we get very little in this moment. We get, Loki, as I said, he's pulling Gungnir out, and Laufey's here, says, "Welcome to Asgard." Laufey smiles, and they walk across the Rainbow Bridge. I mean, it's very brief. Are we getting everything we need? I mean, is the pace building, or do we need more, or even quicker? Any thoughts?
I would love more. I was so invested in the Jane Thor Midgard stuff that, frankly, whenever we went back to Loki, I was like, all right, and then we get a brief glimpse of Loki with his weird hat, and and then we go back to Thor, and it's like, I'd love for them to sort of build. I as I get older and do more of these by the minute podcasts, I become such a proponent of an inner monologue. I would love an inner monologue for Loki, just for a little bit. Just give me some sense of like planning, or like or even an outer, like a film noirish monologue or something where it feels, I don't know. It felt like I needed more with him, like a whole scene, put some scenes together a little bit more, maybe.
You want the text box that has the inner thoughts, and also potentially a see this, minute, or see this, movie.
Always
signed by the, the writer.
Always.
Yeah.
Smile and Stan.
I think that, the pace does pick up, and I feel like part of that is definitely like we had a lot of the growth, which is kind of, I think, a big thing that Marvel does. It's like a majority of the film is about how is this character growing and changing and what they're going through. And then the last 20 minutes are like, okay, now a race to the finish line.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily always bad, because, earlier I made a D&D joke, but it's the same thing with D&D. I feel like a lot of people don't want to be in combat for a full hour, because it can really just get bogged down with rulebook checking and all this other stuff. And that's what these movies are also trying to avoid. I mean, comic books don't spend 6 books unless it's like the end of like a huge storyline or arc that's like, or an event rather. Like, they don't spend 6 books of just fighting. It's a lot of like storytelling, and then just like 5 or 6 pages maybe total of a fight, and then boom, you're done. And that's what happens here. So I do agree. I could have used, even if it was just a minute more of Loki or even Laufey, honestly, just like having some form of, even if it's just a flashback to what their deal was, but also perhaps letting you in a little bit on what Loki's side is.
Right.
And again, like we'll see it, but like there's no context. It just happens, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment. And, I guess I don't really have a problem with the pace. Certainly watching a movie like 1 minute at a time and breaking it down and analyzing it, you really you do lose a little bit of kind of a sense of how the actual film is paced out, as you look at it minute by minute. I mean,
No, Andy, it's the filmmakers that are wrong, not us.
That's right.
Okay, principal.
But it is kind of fun to watch, and it's interesting to look at and see like how things are working and what's not working, and because I mean sometimes you can feel it. I think that for me largely this works, but as we kind of continue this week, there may be some elements that it's like they might have been able to squeeze a few more things in here. Mm-hmm. I have a big question here, though, for both of you, as relates to Loki. Well, one, why are they walking, and why are they walking so slowly? It is going to take them forever to get to the palace. This is like the most glacial-paced walk I've seen when you're sneaking people into the palace.
Glacial? Frost giant?
And then, right, well, maybe that's why. But then the other thing is, like, so is Loki magically concealing them right now? Is he kind of like, because, like, I mean, we've seen the Rainbow Bridge. It goes right through town on its way to the palace, which is in the middle. Like, if people just look out their windows, are they going to see like Loki leading Laufey and another frost giant along the Rainbow Bridge? Or, I mean, is it possible they would think that it's just like two kings getting together to chat? Or is Loki concealing them? Do you have any thoughts on this?
This is the kind of thing that I'd love another minute or two with, because I could just as easily see them being like, all right, now let's walk along. Oh, and now let's turn here, and here's where
my little magic door
cloud
that
is held by wolves or something takes us to the palace or whatever. And but because it's just like, and they're walking, and we cut away, and we cut back, and they're there.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know. They got a lot better about like Loki's sort of concealing magic and stuff as the movies went on too.
I am assuming that although we don't see it, there are certainly like they have ships and kind of like the Asgard version of cars like there that we've seen in other films. And I don't know if we saw them in Thor 1.
No, just horses.
But I'm pretty sure they're definitely in Dark World.
Yeah, they're in Dark World. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But the other thing is that like there has to be some form of magic or something that happens with that bridge, because in multiple films, people get from the Bifrost to suddenly the kingdom, like, in an instant. In Thor Ragnarok, Scourge has to run after Thor, who just flies off, and like he's very clearly much slower, but only 3 minutes later is there in the scene like, hark, Thor has arrived. So it's like something, there has to be some sort of like taxi, quote unquote, station for them to get into to then take off, I'm not sure where that would be or how they would do that. But, they also clearly snuck the frost giants in the beginning of the film.
Yeah, right.
Some section. So like there has to be some sort of, like James said, like a secret corner that if you cut through here and then hit these 3 bricks, like a passageway opens up and you can sneak through.
Right.
Well, couldn't it also be, isn't it, refresh my knowledge of Thor physics here, isn't an Einstein-Rosen bridge, it like closes space-time or something? Is it like a wormhole sort of deal? Like it's a bridge from...
But it doesn't do it on this side of the bridge. That's like on the other side when the observatory, when its end of it points out into space, then it's taking the energy from this bridge and it's using that Bifrost energy to kind of create that Einstein-Rosen bridge.
Because it almost feels like in like a sort of never-ending story in way of like you start walking and then before you know it, you're like... The distance is an illusion almost. Like, it's there and it's majestic, but you're where you want to go because of the...
Well, it does look like a giant, like, moving sidewalk, right? Like, it feels like as you're running on it, it should be moving with you and helping you get there that much faster.
There has to be something there.
Oh, I would love a Taika Waititi, just sort of them standing there, just sort of, like, checking their watch.
Yeah.
Get to the side if you're going to stand. Right?
Exactly.
So we have 2 guards who remain to flank Heimdall, who is frozen. We do see that Heimdall is still frozen. And what I love here is we actually hear him struggling inside the ice. He's trying to scream his way out, apparently, kind of starting to crack the ice. But why do they leave a couple Frost Giant guards here? Are they purposefully flanking Heimdall, like they're concerned with him? Are they just keeping people from coming into the observatory? I don't know who would be coming down here. Any sense on this as to why they don't also just go with the rest of them?
Okay, so I do believe that part of this is potentially, like, I would imagine this is Loki giving them a warning ahead of time of, like, Heimdall is, like, strong AF. Like, Heimdall is powerful. You know, you can't just assume that he's going to stay frozen or whatever. Or, you know, potentially, you know, he also knows that he's snuck through cracks in the universe, essentially. And even though he believes he is outsmarting his brother, it might not be long before Thor also finds a way, you know. And then also, like you said, like, potentially if someone else is like, oh, I'd like to go, you know, visit my brother in Niflheim. Hey, wait a minute. What are you doing here, Heimdall? Why are you frozen like this, you silly goose? Let me break you out.
You're not supposed to be ice.
Yeah, hang on. I'm pretty sure you don't look like this normally, right? It's a new hairstyle or something? Yeah.
Cool look.
Yeah. Wow. James.
I just also want to say Heimdall is strong AF, where AF stands for although frozen.
Although frozen. That's right.
Yes.
I think that also it might just be... there's a war term that they use in, like, the real fun soldier movies where it's just like it'll slow him down. If he breaks out, there are two people to slow him down ever so much so that it's not like, I've broken out and now it's time to go to work sorting things and taking, you know, bifrosting things and whatever.
I mean, you know, the answer also is probably not even about the strategy of it all. It is just purely like, hi, I'd like to write a scene that has Heimdall do something cool, you know, so.
Well, yeah, that's what it boils down to largely, right? It's like the screenwriters just needed to have Heimdall actually show how awesome he is. And maybe Idris Elba was just like, can't I at least kill somebody? Come on. I mean, all I do is stand around with this sword. I'd like to at least swing it and actually kill someone, so who knows?
Yeah. Turns out Agents Colin Garrett. Those two guys.
Yeah.
That was the end
Tell
of them.
me I'm wrong. Prove to me I'm wrong.
Okay, you're wrong?
Nope. I said prove it.
No, you said say.
I said tell, and then well, okay. All right, fine.
I'm going to write to Kenneth Branagh. Yeah, I'm going to write, be like, hey,
dear
Ken.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about these agents.
He's like, what?
That's right.
Why are you writing to me about this right now?
Shakespeare never wrote a movie called Thor. He calls them movies, but he is.
Sure.
All right. So the minute ends. We've got the Pinsgauer driving toward Bifrost Junction. I'm pretty sure Volstag's on top. We're going to save our conversation about all of that for next time. Any last things with this minute that either of you wanted to get out?
Not if we can save the baffling, my own bafflement until next minute, which is totally fine.
Excellent. We will baffle away in the next minute.
Perfect.
So, well, James and Colin, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Can you remind everyone where they can find you and your podcast?
If you want to find us on Twitter, where we have like all of our links and stuff like that, you can find us at Timeline Scav. SCAV, that's the first four letters of Scavengers, because we can't fit the whole thing on Twitter. And it's also on our podcast network's website as well, which is scavengersnetwork.com. And in the little podcast section, you could even find Timeline Scavengers and listen to an episode or two on that page. So you can find something that you're looking for, like maybe more Agent Coulson, and then follow the show on whatever platform through there.
Excellent. Well, I definitely appreciate it. We're going to be back to talk more about this in minute 92 tomorrow. In the meantime, all of you wonderful listeners, thank you so much for all of your support. We definitely appreciate it. And as Matthew always says, have a good day. And as I always say, until next time, true believers.
Excelsior.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at truestory.fm, And if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for the show.